My name is Zachary Brannigan. I'm the Executive Director of the Land Conservancy, as Sam mentioned. So we're very pleased to be here. We've spent more time in the Historic Museum than I think I have since high school, or before that, when we worked on our exhibit upstairs last year, which Trevor deserves 99% of the credit for that, for designing many of the things up there. We've got all kinds of cool stuff. How many of you been upstairs and have actually seen it? A couple. There's a few things that are sort of neat. You can see how tall you are relative to a white-tailed deer, or how wide is your wingspan compared to a bald eagle. We've got a thing up there, and then there's also a little theater that's going to have all of the films that we'll talk about a little bit today. Those films will be playing up there, and you can watch those whenever you want. And then a bunch of other little bits of information about some of our work around the watershed. So, how many of you are familiar with the Land Conservancy? How many of you are, I apologize if I don't, how many of you are donors to the Land Conservancy and supporters long time? Yeah, so a lot of you, which is wonderful. Thank you. So we are a community-supported 501c3 nonprofit organization. Trevor and I have both been there for 10 days, and in fact realized that today is,
Years.
10 years. What did I say? Days. 10 days. We've been there 10 days. We've packed a lot in the last 10 days. Yeah, this all happened in 10 days. No, the last 10 years, and actually realized that I think today might be the 10-year anniversary of the first day that he and I actually met to talk about him coming to work here. So, so it's kind of cool. Yeah. The Land Conservancy, if you're not terribly familiar with it, it's almost hard to describe in one little blurb, but it is a community-supported conservation and environmental nonprofit organization. It started, this is our 25th anniversary year as an organization as well, which is also pretty special. But so 25 years ago, the Land Conservancy was founded, like many other land conservancies, with a focus on trying to protect a particular piece of property from development. And without getting into all the details there, that's essentially what had happened, is that a group of local leaders and some local activists and people that were advocates for conservation and nature got together and decided that we needed a land trust organization. So it took a little while to get it there. But that's where it came from. And since then, we've protected, we have about 6,000 acres of land under permanent land protection through a variety of different means. Trevor's main role at the Land Conservancy, in addition to keeping me sane, is to be in charge of our protected lands portfolio and, kind of project manage a lot of our field operations. So. The Land Conservancy has grown considerably in the last 10 years. When I started, I was the only full-time person. Now we have 4 full-time director-level positions, and we hire 4 to 6 summer seasonals, and we use a lot of contractors, and much, much larger organization. We went from a 140 square foot sublet office space in the old Bay City Times building to now we have our own building on Euclid Avenue on Fisher there. So we are there quite a bit. We're not always there, given that we're still a relatively small staff. We're in the field a lot, and we work remotely a lot, like a lot of people do now, post-COVID, or on the tail end, hopefully, of the pandemic. So anyway. But the Land Conservancy does a lot of different things, and you're going to see a lot of different things. So I kind of wanted to explain that from sort of an umbrella 20,000 foot view standpoint, because it might feel like we're showing you a lot of things that are, the thread between them is relatively thin. So we worked on permanent land protection for all of those years. We did that through donations, federal grants, all kinds of other things, and accumulated many, many dozens of properties under permanent protection, either through conservation easements or ones that we own, which we call nature preserves, which we open to the public. There's also now, in the last 10 years, since Trevor and I have been there, a third category, which is properties that we've taken over stewardship for, like Discovery Preserve on Euclid Avenue, if you've heard of that. That used to be a county park that was in very bad condition. We actually took that over from the county and renovated it into sort of the family-focused landscape that it is now. Michigan Sugar Trails is another one. It's owned by Michigan Sugar, but we operate it as a nature preserve. Another one that we're going to talk about today, actually, is the soon-to-be-opened Riverbend West project on the west side of Bay City. So we do some of that stuff as well. But we also have a huge focus on community stewardship. And one of the biggest things that we have done is sort of created an intervention in places like Saginaw, where they have a lot of blight and vacant land, where we convert vacant lots that have illegal dumping on them, or old cars or overgrown vegetation or whatever it might be. We convert those, we clean them up, we make them safe, and we convert them to flowering lawn pollinator lots. We've done that on 1,500 and some odd lots in Saginaw, which is crazy. On top of that, we've just added a new program called the Better Branches Regional Tree Initiative, which we'll talk about later, which has been almost like drinking from a fire hose. It's been an overwhelming success from a funding standpoint, to the point where it's potentially forcing our hand in terms of our staff capacity to actually accommodate the interest in this program. And we'll talk about some of the details of that later. But the common thread between those two things you might notice is that neither one of them have anything to do with permanent land protection. And that makes us a little bit unusual in the land trust community. A lot of land trusts really just focus exclusively on buying land and keeping people off of it. And we don't do that. So we have a lot of land that we do protect under conservation easement, which is privately owned but permanently protected from development. But then all of our properties are open to the public, and the lion's share of our effort now goes towards assisting our municipal partners, other nonprofit organizations, private owners, to get their land in shape and ready and open to the public or into conservation circles. So we do a lot of that, raise it and spend it kind of projects, which is a little bit unusual, which makes us, I think, more than a land trust. You'll find that the SBLC is more of a full-fledged, multifaceted conservation nonprofit now. We also do a certain amount of investigations into land use patterns. We provide a lot of information and advocacy to our local units of government about decisions they should be making. Lots of different things. So it's never a dull moment. And a lot of times I find myself getting breathless trying to get all this stuff out. So there's a lot. Today, we wanted to set the stage and talk first and foremost about our Nature on Demand video series, and that kind of is this video series that kind of opens up discussion into lots of other things that we do. So I'll tell you a little bit about the genesis of this. Is like many things, the pandemic, sort of forced and changed the direction of a lot of the things that we do. So we rely heavily on huge volunteer events. We rely on fundraising events. We rely on individuals engaging with the Land Conservancy on a day-to-day basis. So all of those things got kicked over to the side when the pandemic began. In fact, we were able to hold our only single large annual fundraising in-person event, the Osprey Awards. We held that in February of 20, and then a couple weeks later, the world stopped. So we were lucky to squeeze it in. We normally have it in February because it's the only month where we're marginally not busy. But then, of course, in 21, we did not have it. That's a huge loss of revenue for us because my philosophy is not, I'm not a big believer in like lots and lots of fundraising events, because sometimes nonprofit organizations, in my experience, in my career, you find that that's all they do, and then they, the mission and the things they're supposed to be doing are kind of, secondary and third to just making sure they have enough money. Our model is really a lot more about providing services that have value and generating revenue by earning it. So, we will work with the municipality and say we can renovate that park or redo those trails or whatever, and then, they'll basically pay us to do it like a contractor, but at cost, and we also leverage volunteers and philanthropic funds. So it's pennies on the dollar for what it might cost them to actually do it, and it's sort of a community-supported program. But then in so doing, we also earn our way through our lives. So that's kind of how a lot of that works. Well, given that we had this huge deficit looming, we kind of thought, boy, we need to provide something to our corporate funders and our donors and that like to support the Osprey Awards with something else. And Trevor and I have had a lot of experience with art and photography and videography and that. And we had done a series of kind of just cute sort of iPhone-driven, selfie videos during the pandemic when everybody was at home, just to stay in touch with our constituency. And what did we call that? Socially distant science and adventure? Mm-hmm. Something like that? Yeah. And so there was a series of Facebook videos that were just kind of goofy and not real high production quality, but they were very popular. So we decided to go to our donors and sponsors and say, could we do a more elaborate video series that's got a lot more production quality and effort put into it. And you could be the sponsors of those videos, so they get exposure. They're showing that, but honestly, our overhead was greatly reduced because we weren't feeding people dinner and drinks and all that stuff. So that's what we came up with. So we did a video series. We began it last, early summer, and actually there's still one last installment to come that's going to come out this spring, and that'll be the completion of this initial run of these videos. Ultimately, you'll be able to find them all on our social media pages, which we can tell you about before the end of everything. But this first one, we're just going to show you one of these videos. I think it's maybe 15 minutes-ish long. And this one in particular is timely because it's all about migration. So it's about bird migration, spring birds and that. And we do something every year called Every Bird Counts, which this is our only other, honestly, legitimate fundraiser that we do. But it's not a big event. This is something where individuals will pledge like a bowl-a-thon or something. All right, let's say that you're going to give me 25 cents per species that we find in 24 hours. Does anybody have any idea what like a really good number is for an experienced birder to get out into our region here? How many species of bird do you think that you could spot in a single day in a 24-hour period? All the people in my family you don't get to guess. Yeah, look, my dad and mom are here. And my mother and father-in-law, and my wife, and my son, and my aunt. And Trevor's wife Erica is here. And I was the president at their wedding. So like, yeah, this is the family section over here. But does anybody have any idea how many birds you might find in a day if you were really an experienced birder? Is anybody here a birder?
25.
25, 100? Yeah. Our record is 154. But usually it ends up coming around maybe 130s, 140s, especially with some significant changes to water levels and habitat loss of shorebird habitat. We actually lose a lot of species because we don't have too many places around here to find shorebirds anymore. But you'll learn a little bit more about this process here. So we get sponsors, and we actually might raise like $15,000 to $20,000 with just people, pledging, 5-10 cents a bird, and then we send them basically an invoice and say, we found, here's the list of birds, and then we like to put out a little video or some information about our adventure that day. So we, we've done it differently over the years, but I think this one we started at 6 p.m. and then we finish at 6 p.m. the following day. So there's birding at night, there's birding in the morning, all kinds of stuff. So, you think we're ready to play the video?
Yeah.
All right, cool. So we're going to play this, and then we'll talk about it for a minute. Then we'll talk about some of our new programs and stuff, and take any questions, and Bob's your uncle. That'll be the day. Nature isn't only what we experience when we go to a national park or on an up north camping trip. Nature is all around us, and it is amazing. My name is Zachary Brannigan, and with my friends at the Saginaw Basin Land Conservancy, I want to show you how to experience and protect nature right here at home in Michigan's heartland. Join us as we explore habitat, outdoor adventures, and wildlife. Learn with us about what others are doing and about what you can do to protect our natural world right here in your backyard. Welcome to Nature on Demand.
Our season-long sponsors for Nature on Demand are Hemlock Semiconductor and the Morley Family Foundation. Thank you for your incredible, generous support. Every year, in spring, there's an incredible rite of passage. There's nothing like the miracle of migration. Millions and millions of birds and wildlife of all kinds make their annual journey to their nesting grounds, their breeding grounds, or their hunting grounds. Every year, this is a rite of passage for us as well, as we seek every bird we can find for our annual birding derby, Every Bird Counts. This important fundraiser is not only something that supports the Land Conservancy, it's something that binds us together as a team. It's something that reconnects us with nature here in our area, and it's something we look forward to every year. After an incredibly difficult 2020, this was a way for us to get to know our watershed again. This is our story.
All right, what time is it?
6:05.
It's game time.
It's game time.
Let's go find some birds.
Everybody ready to go?
Yeah.
All right, we're at Matt's cabin right now, so we're going to go and see what's going on with that. Shut my door. You got it?
Got it.
No, not really.
Not at all.
How you doing, Matt?
I'm good. Seen anything? Thanks, Lisa.
I knew you were watching. First date be like.
Trevor and his snapping turtle.
Yeah.
Don't touch it.
Touch it.
Well, we're in Tuttle Marsh. It's like 9:15 at night. We just had our run-in with our snapping turtle, and we're gonna see what we can find. Just a few mosquitoes. It is buggy. Oh, that's cool. Just heard some coyotes, which is always kind of fun. I don't know. It's getting pretty dark out here, so hopefully we'll start getting some owls, because that's what's next. Everybody's kind of getting a little bit tired of the mosquitoes, though. But boy, is it loud out here! Listen to all the herps, all the frogs and toads. It's pretty neat. Whippoorwill, I think. Coyotes, whippoorwill.
Wolf spiders are predators. They do not spin webs. They catch their prey just like a wolf does, tracking them down and hunting them.
Lisa, put your hand down there so we can see how big he is. Put it right, just grab him. Pick him up for me, would you? No? No? Is that, that's not going to happen, huh?
Freaking me out.
That is cool.
Climb on my
Ooh,
clipboard.
look at how fast he is.
They're not venomous to you, so don't worry about them too much. However, a 2-inch spider crawling up your arm could certainly give you a bit of a startle.
Jump right into your nightmares.
We were lucky to find this one and get a good look at him as it hunted in the nighttime.
Oh, he's on your leg.
No.
This is Lisa Cleland's Wild Kingdom. Do double check our
Little
math.
QA/QC here to make sure I didn't miss something that somebody saw.
This is like late night board meeting.
Yeah, right. How many do you think we have right now? We think 71,
71 is what I counted, but
and it's 10:32 at night.
As the mascot of the Saginaw Basin Land Conservancy, red foxes occupy a special place in our hearts. Red foxes typically mate in January, and a couple months later, they start having babies known as kits. It's unusual to get such a good look at them like we did at Tawas Point this year. They are playful and cuddly and adorable. However, do us a favor and give them their space. We shot these photos with a telephoto lens, but these kids could have cared less. They were all over the pathways with people all around them.
Actually, at least for the first we played it back while we were on our way there, so we could. And then
I have never in my life had bugs like that. Mosquitoes, holy cow. It is crazy out here at Tawas Point. But we did get some incredible time with a bunch of baby foxes, so maybe enjoy that for a minute. But holy cow. The bugs out here, the mosquitoes, it's crazy. It's crazy. Things we do.
In the lower 48 states, we have 4 major migration flyways. A flyway is like a super highway for birds. Millions of birds each year use each of the 4 major flyways. Birds tend to stick to their same flyway. In fact, some birds can only be found east or west of, let's say, the Mississippi River. Along these flyways are places like Michigan. In Michigan, we are on the very eastern edge of the Mississippi Flyway. Our whole state, in some ways, is a migration trap. A migrant trap is a place where you have a specific knack for concentrating migrating birds in larger than normal numbers, according to the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. They say that these migrant traps often become well known as birding hotspots. It's the result of local weather conditions, an abundance of food, or the local topography. So, Tawas Point, for instance, being a hook that sticks out into Lake Huron, acts as a perfect migrant trap, catching birds that have crossed Saginaw Bay.
It's not as orangey. I think they only have technical. If you look at common, what do they pick up here? You're barely in it. It's just a towhee. We had towhee.
The yellow-headed blackbird is a species that typically can only be found in the western United States. However, a small breeding population resides in our area every year at Nyanquing Point. Sometimes when you get lucky, like Lisa Cleland did this year, you'll find one in an unusual spot. Lisa found one on Tawas Point.
Gonna jump in, Lisa? Oh, wow, wild Trevor.
Is related to you at all?
Pretty.
Pretty cool.
Fuzzy.
I didn't realize how fuzzy they were.
Well, this is that time when everything gets to be kind of a grind. We have 138, I think, species, and every single species that you can get from here on out is like a whole trip just to get one, to a new location. So I don't know how many more we're going to get. We got a couple more good spots to go, so hopefully we'll get into the 140 range. But I don't know. Only a few hours left. It's getting hot. And see what we got left. Wasatch Comocquat Nature Preserve. This is on the intersection of Bay County and Aranac County on Bay Aranac County Line Road. It's an SBLC preserve. It's like 120 acres. Very birdy place.
We never did find that 136th species, finding 135 different birds during this year's Every Bird Counts. But it isn't just the number of birds that we find that matters. It's about reconnecting with nature. It's about experiencing the land. It's about adventure. It's about making memories. It's about rejuvenating our conservation ethic and planning for the conservation work ahead this year. It's about being together with our friends and our colleagues after a long winter. And it's about the experience and the memories that we make along the way. Every year, the miracle of migration blows us away with everything that we see. This year was no different, and we're looking forward to next year. We want to say a very special thanks to all of our friends and sponsors that helped make this happen. And thank you very much for watching this episode of Nature on Demand.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that. There's more episodes of that, and we did one. We sort of wrestled with which one to show you, and honestly, we would have maybe showed you two, unless we didn't want to keep you here for 2 hours. But the other one that I really am proud of is Winter Wildlife, which actually was the first episode, and it sort of follows Trevor and I and Ted that works with us on a overwinter trip to the remote parts of northern Minnesota in the Sax-Zim Bog when it was like 20 below zero, and it's pretty wild, and we had some incredible experiences with nature there. We were able to photograph great gray owls and things like that, so really, really neat stuff. So I hope you get an opportunity to check those out. But if you have any questions about how we made those movies or anything, I'm happy to answer any of those either now or at the end of it. I actually brought some of the photography and videography equipment that we use to do that, but we kind of just produced that on the fly while we're doing things. Does anybody have any questions about anything that we had in that? Any things about the trip or about birding? Yeah.
Are all the episodes shown upstairs?
So right now, are they all on it upstairs?
I think right now there's 4 that are in rotation in the little theater in the exhibit, and then once we complete the final installments that Zach was talking about earlier, we're going to have those available as well. So the whole series will be.
Okay.
So yeah, there's a little theater upstairs with 3 Leopold benches that Trevor built that actually you can kind of go in there and then you can watch the videos on repeat in there. But the Winter Wildlife one I'm sure is on there, and then this one, and yeah, one we did on sustainable practices in agriculture, and we had a lot of behind-the-scenes access with Star of the West and kind of like looked at their whole operation and the things that they're doing to try to make agriculture more sustainable. We did, what are some of the other ones? I'm trying to remember the...
Let's see, sustainable agriculture. We did the one on SVSU's campus.
Oh yeah.
Sustainability.
Yeah, large employer and like campus sustainability. We talked about things there. The last episodes are going to be a 2-part about trees and about tree ecology and tree conservation and all that. And we'll talk in a minute just about some of the issues that we're actually having here in the region with trees. Without any further talking about the videos, if you're interested in those, we can talk about them more. We'll be available after, and we'll also go upstairs and hang out at the exhibit. So if anybody wants to come up and take a look, we can answer questions there. But we thought it'd be a good opportunity to just talk about some of the other programs and things that are going on right now. I'm actually going to turn it over to Trevor because he's kind of been the man in charge of a project called Riverbend West. So I'm going to let him talk about that a little bit, and you can kind of get the lay of the land for what that's all about.
All right, thanks, Zach. My name's Trevor Edmonds. I'm the program director at the Conservancy, and I know Zach mentioned this kind of just by name earlier in the introduction to the Conservancy, but Riverbend West is a project right here in town that we're really excited about. It's been quite a long time in the making, not only for us, but for the region itself. If anyone's familiar with the site, it's over on Marquette Avenue. It's on the it's on the west side of the river on Marquette Avenue, across from where Defoe Park is and where Millennium Skate Park is. So not very far from here, just north of the Liberty Bridge, which unfortunately you cannot get across right now, but hopefully sooner than later. But the city of Bay City acquired this property in 1997, which is kind of ironic because that's the same year we were founded as an organization. But they purchased the property with state natural resource trust fund dollars with the intent of opening it as a rustic nature site. For a variety of reasons, that never really happened. So that kind of enters one of the reasons why an entity such as ourselves can be so important to our local municipalities and trying to basically serve as a tipping point partner to bring projects like that across the finish line. So probably at this point, about 3 or 4 years ago now, we started working with the city on basically trying to dig that up and bring that project home. So a lot of that involved doing updated site environmental to find out if there were any issues on site with soils or anything else that would have to be potentially remediated before it could be open to the public for the vision that ourselves and the city had for the property. So we've gotten through that process. The onset of the pandemic did slow that down a bit, but luckily last year we were able to get through the final environmental, get through that process, and then now we're in the final stages of activating that site. Last year there was actually I'm going to switch it to a photo here. So this kind of gives you a better idea. This is a drone shot that Zach took of the site. This is kind of looking in the sort of west-southwest direction. You can see Marquette Avenue right in the middle of the top third of the photo there with the skate park. This was actually taken a few years ago before any work of any nature had been done on the site. Since this was taken, we've done some tree and vegetation work. The permeable trail that goes through basically the spine of the property was installed last fall. That was made possible with a generous contribution from the Bay Area Community Foundation. But in the next couple of weeks, you're going to be seeing a lot of activity out there with tree planting, interpretive signage, boulders for benches, a lot of different things that's going to basically bring that site up to spec to make that be a nice public amenity. We have a ribbon cutting plan for the site on June 9th, so we're right about 2 months out from that. So we have an exciting 2 months ahead of us to kind of get across the finish line with our final things out there. But it's a really interesting piece. It's right across the river from where the Defoe shipyard was at one point, which hasn't been in operation since the mid-70s, if I remember correctly. But it's also one of the last remaining undeveloped pieces of shoreline on the river in the county, so it has that going for it as well. But basically, it's really in line with our vision as an organization to basically create and preserve green spaces like this within our community. It is really interesting as far as like a wildlife observation standpoint as well, because as you can see, it's right in the middle of a pretty dense residential area. There is a little bit of commercial along Marquette Avenue as well, but we've seen red fox out there, deer, a whole variety of songbirds, waterfowl, different wading birds and things like that. But yeah, it's something we're really excited to be opening soon. And I'll actually turn it back over to Zach here about another project we want to talk about called Better Branches, because this project has a very strong tree planting component and ecological restoration that's involved in it. So that's something that's really kind of the core of this other Better Branches project that we're going to be working on in Saginaw as well.
Actually, while this photo is still up, it's kind of a good, all the vegetation that's along the riverfront there is actually gone now. So all of those trees, you can see there's a bunch of dead ash trees there from the emerald ash borer. And actually a lot of this sort of sprucey green vegetation along the shoreline is invasive Phragmites. And then a lot of the other species that were up in there were pioneer or other invasive species, or species that had really gotten out of control over there. So if you were to go out there right now, you would see that it's this really neat long pervious surface trail, which means that water will filter right through it, but it's as durable as asphalt. But other than that, it looks like a 8-acre dirt lot right now because there's stuff planted, but it's not up yet. And actually, we're going to do a controlled burn there, hopefully this week. It depends on the weather, but we're going to actually burn this entire site, which has got a lot of great ecological benefits as we're trying to put in new plant regimes. So it's going to be pretty intense. And then after the burn and after the cleanup after the burn, then it's like all hands on deck with a 2-week intense period with volunteer groups and everybody to plant, hundreds of trees and put in all those amenities. So as far as trees go, We had another sort of brainstorm a while ago was that a lot of our municipal partners were getting phone calls all the time about people wanting to donate trees or do a memorial tree or can I put a tree at Carroll Park? And a lot of our trees on our municipal properties in Saginaw and in Bay City and in Midland everywhere have been suffering from the same sort of blights and issues that trees may be in your yard. How many of you have had an ash tree die in your yard or on your property? Can be expensive if you wanted to replace it or remove it. You know, and actually what happened was that we started digging into it, and Ted Lind, who's our Director of Community Conservation, he's sort of our community liaison. You saw him in the bird video there. You know, he said we should really start thinking about what's going on with the overall tree canopy in the populated communities that we serve. And what do you think a healthy tree canopy is, like percentage-wise? Like how much of your community should be shrouded with trees in a temperate climate like ours? Just a guess.
30%?
A little bit higher than that.
45?
Yeah, 40% is sort of a good rule of thumb. It used to be like a recommendation from, you know, the Arbor Day Foundation and that, but now it's much more flexible because obviously in Arizona it might be different than it is here. But for the type of climate that we have, 40% is a good rule of thumb. Saginaw has about 23%, and we have about 17% in Bay City. So both of these communities are significantly behind where they actually should be, which introduces a whole bunch of issues. So when you actually get to the point where your tree canopy is that low, it can no longer self-sustain. So like we are not getting naturally, you know, the trees are not naturally reproducing the way that they were. And also, of course, if you have a little tree coming up in your yard, a lot of times you yank it. It's not where you want a tree. In parks, it might be the same way. So we're in a pretty delicate condition in this community in terms of a self-sustaining tree canopy. So in order to get it back up there, municipalities are also not wanting to plant as many street trees as they used to, for instance, because it interferes with utility line placement and that. Parks have lost a lot of trees, but if you were to put a street tree every 30 feet on every single street in Bay City and populate our parks entirely with trees, you still wouldn't actually get anywhere near your tree canopy goals. So this complicates things because what that means is, where do the trees have to go? They have to go on private property in order for the tree canopy to be self-sustaining. In Bay City, it's a little bit stronger in terms of people replacing trees in that. In Saginaw, their tree cover number is a little bit higher, but they also have about a third of the community is vacant land. And so on many of those vacant lots, trees have been allowed to grow. Now, that 23% number is probably sort of artificially inflated because the vast majority of the trees on the east side that might be sort of propping that number up are not good, healthy, solid trees. A lot of times they're invasive trees or they're ornamental trees that have gotten out of hand and that. So a lot of times they might even be just overgrown shrubs because you do these analyses with aerial photography and certain softwares that we use. But the long and short is that both of those communities are suffering. Now Midland has a 40% tree canopy almost on the number, but it also has a 500-acre forest inside its city limits, the Midland City Forest. So they cheat to get to that number. If you take that 500 acres out of it, Midland is no better than their other two communities. Like, I mean, seriously, that'll make a big, big dent. So we need more trees, and we need them on private land. Trees are expensive. Has anybody experienced a shortage of anything during the pandemic? Everything, right? I mean, trees are no different. So getting trees from nursery stock right now is extremely competitive, difficult, and very expensive. So if you wanted to replace a decent sized tree in your yard, if you wanted to put in a 15-foot tall tree with a 2-inch diameter at breast height, 2.5-inch diameter at breast height trunk, in like a balled and burlap form and have a contractor put it in for you, you're looking at $500 to $1,000 for one tree. So a lot of people can't afford that or don't want to prioritize that. So you lose your tree dies, and you don't replace it. So our thought was, how can we supply trees for free to people on a nearly unlimited basis? So I mentioned before that we've been working on vacant land in Saginaw for the last 5 years. We've actually raised and spent about $1.2 million on vacant land and blight remediation in Saginaw. And our challenge there now is, what do you do with all that vacant land? And so just kind of had the bright idea to say, why don't we grow trees there and start our own tree nurseries? So that's what we're doing. So Better Branches is basically a program that will ultimately result in thousands of trees, but the trees are not necessarily the actual product. The product of the Better Branches Regional Tree Initiative is to create self-sustaining perpetual sources of trees and an industry around tree growth using vacant land that then can be distributed for free to municipal partners, nonprofits, individual landowners, and on the hundreds and hundreds of vacant lots that we now manage in Saginaw that we have cleaned up. So we have found that on lots that had repeat illegal dumping, for instance, if we plant a row of trees along the street, then the repeat illegal dumping tends to stop, because even illegal dumpers don't want to run over a tree. Nobody wants to run over a tree. So we found that we've had very good luck with that. So we wanted to expand that, but with trees being hundreds of dollars a piece, we can't afford it. So we're going to grow our own trees from whip stock. So we actually are going to be putting in hundreds of trees. I think we're planting 1,200 trees in the next 4 weeks or something. And we're doing, I think it's going to be on 3 individual properties initially, or 2? How are we going to start with? 3 individual properties in Saginaw are going to be our initial tree nurseries. And we have a nonprofit partner, the First Word Community Center, that has a summer youth employment program. So young men and women who live in Saginaw and some of the hardest hit neighborhoods of Saginaw are getting, we've been working with them for years on helping us in Saginaw. They're going to have an opportunity to learn all about arboriculture and how to take care of trees, how to plant trees and all that. So the project is about developing this culture and industry of using an underutilized resource to try to solve more than one problem. So trying to occupy vacant land and prevent illegal dumping, and also create this sort of self-sustaining population of trees. Basically, we can create our own, a few years down the road, we'll be able to create our own starter stock from the trees that we're growing. So we won't have to buy even starter stock. We'll be able to generate our own starter stock and replant as we pull them out. And we have an almost unlimited number of lots that we can do this on. And when I mentioned drinking out of a fire hose, I wasn't lying. Like, we had initially thought that 2 things happened. First, we were like, well, let's set an ambitious budget for 3 years and develop this program. We came up with a number of about $153,000 budget for a 3-year effort, all in, to kind of get this thing rolling. We saw, well, you know, we raise a lot of money for other programs. We don't want to beg Peter to pay Paul, so to speak. So, you know, we'll take it slow and all that. We have 3 years to raise this money, you know, about $50,000 a year. Well, we're basically done with fundraising, and we haven't even started the project yet. That's the kind of interest that we've gotten. We've had grants solicited to us, you know, companies calling us saying we want to make a donation to that program. So it's fully funded, and we've even been invited by a federal program to apply for a very large sum of money to try to expand this at some sort of enterprise scale. So fingers crossed, and the creek don't rise. Maybe we'll get additional funding and be able to expand this even more. But there's one last thing too involved with this, which is an individual tree donation program called Taking Root. And Lisa in our office, you saw her in the video, she had the idea to say we should do a tree donation program, because all of our municipal partners were saying that people call and they want to donate a bench or a tree, and you know, they can't stop everything at a city to go and do that. So I said, well, why don't we create a program, and then all the municipalities could source everything through us. We can buy at scale, and then we can put the trees in for the municipalities. And so we had bets in the office as to how many we would get, you know, before the end of the year. We put the mailing out in like November. So we thought, Lisa thought 3, I said 5. I think it was more like 40. And these are $500 donations for a tree with a little recognition plaque. You get to choose what park it goes in. And they're in like Carroll Park, Vets Park. In Saginaw, it would be, which parks do we pick in Saginaw?
There's one at Nash, I think.
Immerman, yeah. So, variety of parks around the region that you can choose from. And actually, Al and Joy McFadgen, does anybody know Al and Joy? They recently moved out of the area, but Al worked for the city for years. Joy was a public schools teacher here for years. Great people, been involved with the Conservancy. They made a considerable donation to put 25 of those trees in addition at Riverbend West. So there's going to be a grove of trees all entirely donated by them as sort of a legacy gift, because Al worked for the city and helped acquire that property. So he was excited to kind of leave that behind. So trees are in rough shape. We've got these other issues that need to be solved. So hopefully this program will kind of marry those things together. And that's what that Better Branches Tree Initiative is all about.
One other thing we just wanted to mention a little bit too, as far as projects, is we've covered a lot of the work that we've been doing, not only in Bay City but in Saginaw. Zach kind of alluded to it a bit when we, were introing the Conservancy. First off, that a lot of our core work involved permanent land protection, and this project here, the map that you can see, is for an ongoing project that we have called Saginaw Bay Coastal Wildlands. This actually involves a series of our permanently protected properties that are nature preserves that are in the Northern Bay and Aranet County area. These are properties that we acquired through a variety of means, federal grants, and through one, a court case that ultimately found the landowner to be in violation of the Clean Water Act, and the land had to be turned over to a reputable conservation agency, which happened to be us at the time back in 2011. So as you can see, these were the darker green properties are preserves that are ours, and a couple years ago we had the idea to basically combine all these sort of somewhat disparate properties into a network of connected sites through joint management, interpretation, and improved trails. So hence the whole Saginaw Bay Coastal Wildlands Network. We are doing this project in conjunction with the Saginaw Chippewa Indian Tribe, and some of the initial work thus far has been new signage, names for the properties to connect them together, interpretation, and actually when Zach was mentioning the controlled burns that should be happening very soon at the Riverbend West site in town, at the same time those are going to be happening, two of the properties included in this network, the Pinconning site, which is just east of the city of Pinconning, and the Wasatch Kamoka Preserve that you can see just above that Pinconning unit there. Those two sites, as part of this network, we're also going to be receiving controlled burn work as well. Right now, we're kind of looking at the possibility of getting additional federal funding to continue that work, and to hopefully, with some ability here, connect some of these properties together so that we can have not only trails on the properties as they currently exist, but trails that will, whether through land acquisitions or easements, actually connect them together. So you could theoretically take a hike all the way from the southern access point of the Wasatch Kamoka unit all the way up to Saginaw, and potentially from there all the way up to Standish at the top of the map. So this is kind of just something we wanted to touch on too, just to remind people that despite the fact that we are doing so much work in the larger population centers of our service area, that we have not forgotten the core and sort of the roots of our organization, that we are constantly looking at ways to not only steward the lands that are under our protection, but figure out ways to do that better and make them more appealing to people as places to get out and enjoy the outdoors. So yeah, it's exciting that, and things like these projects are even though we might give them these 2-3 year scopes, they have the potential to be perpetual things for not only like sources of good work for us, but opportunities for people to get out and enjoy these places. So I think we just have a couple events coming up too that we were going to touch on.
Thankfully, this year we're going to have the Osprey Awards again. Normally, I mentioned we have them in February. It's actually going to be in May this year, May 17th. It's going to be. It's actually at Saginaw Valley State University in Curtis Hall, which is appropriate because Charlie Curtis, the building was named after, is one of our primary founders. So we've had it there. This will be our 9th annual, but only 8th actual event because of missing last year due to the pandemic. But if you're willing to spend a night with a bunch of people geeking out about nature and watch some more fun videos and that, and have drinks and a nice meal, the Osprey Awards are a good opportunity to do that. And you get to know a lot about the Land Conservancy. Typically what we do is reward volunteers and other organizations in the community that have done a lot towards conservation. I think this year, being our 25th anniversary, we're probably going to be focused on bragging a little bit and reflecting on our history. We're going to be providing some recognition for many of our longtime board members and some of our earliest people that were involved with the Land Conservancy from the very beginning. So the Osprey Awards are coming up, and you'll probably see a little bit about it in the news, but if you're interested, we'd love to have you. And then the last one is Every Bird Counts, which I had mentioned too, which the video is all about. So we are going to do that again this year. We're going to be a little smarter and do it from noon to noon this year, so we don't have that second afternoon lag where everybody was kind of ready to be done with it because it gets pretty exhausting. But it's going to be noon to noon, May 23 through 24. We put a lot of live posts on social media about our progress during the day, and then we typically make some kind of a video. If you're interested in supporting the Land Conservancy, being a sponsor of Every Bird Counts is a good way to do it. We have little forms here that if you're not on our mailing list, you'd get one in the mail. If you were, if not, feel free to grab one. We'll have them available after the thing here. So we're hoping for more birds this year. We got just the perfect weekend. That third week in May is the best time for migration, typically in our area, although that can vary according to weather and other things. But we have, over the years, we've found that May 15th through May 30th period is just about the best to see wildlife here in the area. So we are going to be doing that again. And then, of course, we have tons of volunteer opportunities, things like that. If you're interested in those, you can follow up with us later or contact our office during business hours and find out where those might be. So you can plant trees, you can get involved in cleanups and all that. Starting next week, I think we have maybe 14 or 16 volunteer days coming up in the next month and a half. So it'll be pretty intense. So everybody took spring break off, and I said, I hope you enjoy it because the next couple months are going to be terrible. So we're going to be pretty busy. Does anybody have any questions about the Land Conservancy or the work that we do or anything you'd like to talk about or anything? We're happy to answer anything. Yes?
How did you determine which types of trees that you're going to use for better branches? And what might those trees be?
Good question.
Curious.
Yeah, that is a great question. So there's a couple things. I guess some of it involves soil types that we're planting a lot of these trees in. Like when it came to the Better Branches project specifically, when we were looking at these 3 areas that we're going to be doing these initial pilot nurseries on, we actually had soil testing done by the Saginaw Conservation District on those locations to determine, based on soil content and nutrients and things like that, which species would be best suited for those areas. So that informed it to some extent. And then looking at existing species in those areas, just basically anecdotally checking to see which types of species were thriving in the city. So that informed it a bit. And then also taking that and then kind of backing into, as Zach alluded to a little bit earlier, based on some of our vendors that we get this stock from for initially establishing the nurseries, what the availability was. So basically taking, science to inform what you might want to determine a wish list, and then setting that against the backdrop of reality of what you can actually get. And then to kind of pivot from that a little bit, as far as Riverbend West, there was a degree of that as well, but also with that we were looking at creating like a grove of trees that represented a great and wide diversity of trees that you might have seen more commonly pre-settlement in the area. So at Riverbend West, you're going to see upwards of about 15 different species we'll be planting versus just 4 that we're going to be planting as part of the nurseries in Saginaw. So there's red maples, white oaks, American chestnut, and let's see, the other one was lindens are going to be in the nursery. So we'll see how those go as far as the pilot. And then that's the other thing too about a lot of this work is like when we start doing this stuff, we don't just put our blinders on and just keep charging forward no matter what. Like we're always monitoring how things go and checking on feedback and things like that and improving as we go, which was, something with our pollinator project on a lot of the vacant lands was testing different approaches, see how they go, see how people respond to them, and reacting accordingly to that. So thanks for asking.
Great name. I love the name Better Branches.
It's funny because we had, originally we didn't have a name for it, or we called it something else, I can't remember, and we had a meeting with a top funder, like a guy that supported us a lot in that, and we like to have these little QA/QC meetings. Like when we're thinking about a project, I like to meet with philanthropic leaders and say, this is what we're thinking about doing. Can I get your feedback before we ever ask you for money? So we can sort of design programs that match up with the philanthropic objectives or landscape of the groups that we get money from. In case you can't tell, I'm the pencil pusher nonprofit manager guy, and he's the guy that actually knows everything about nature. So Trevor's a master naturalist and an arborist, and I'm an urban planner by trade and a sort of a consensus builder and community engager type person. So that's how we that's how we co-manage the Land Conservancy all these years. But yeah, so, you know, thanks for saying that, but it was funny because we met with him and he was like, well, your other project was called the Pollinator Project. He's like, we need more alliteration. He's like, you know, this other name you got, I don't like it. So then we changed the name to Better Branches, and then thankfully he's been instrumental in getting us many tens of thousands of dollars ever since then. So I think Trevor came up with a name. I'm pretty sure Trevor came up with Better Branches when I just sat everybody down on staff, and I'm like, we need to have something with alliteration, so what do you got? And that's what we ended up with. But those are all natives or nativars, all those species too. That's the other simple answer to your question, is that they be native trees. Yeah. Well, if there's nothing else, this was a pleasure for us. We really appreciate it. We were looking forward to this. I hope that you take the time to go upstairs and take a look at the exhibit and see what's up there, because there's all kinds of information about our Saginaw blight remediation initiatives, which, I mean, everybody wants to come to a museum and learn about blight remediation, so it's pretty exciting. But there's wildlife stuff up there. There's some photography. There's a lot of things to kind of see up there. So we hope you get an opportunity to go up and check that out. Feel free to tag either of us after and ask us any questions, or if you want to learn more. We'd be happy to share that with you. So thanks very much. Thanks to our families for coming. And yeah, we appreciate it.